Hello everybody, it's Jen, Scrapbena Creations. I'm here with 5 cards from the June 2019 Pink and Main Crafty Courtyard subscription kit called The Shore. So here is the first card, very clean and simple. When I unboxed the contents of the kits, which I will link above in case you missed, I fell in love with the little postcard that came in the subscription kit. So I wanted to recreate that, and I just cut out a piece of the beautiful blue and tan wood grain paper that came in the full 6x6 paper pad. I did die cut that out with my Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. You can see there that one side of it didn't cut. I must have had it off the plate in my die cutting machine, so I simply just trimmed that up with my scissors. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Anchor stamp set that comes in the 6x6 stamp set this month. And I'm going to stamp that using some Tempting Turquoise ink from Stampin' Up. It was the perfect paper, or perfect ink that matched the image that was stamped on that little postcard. So I was just lining it up to make sure I had it mostly centered. I am going to stamp this a couple times just so that the ink darkens up a little so you can see that on the wood grain paper. Once I get this done, I'm just going to clean up my stamp with my stamp Shammy, and I'm going to adhere this to my card base. Super simple. Anybody could make this card. It's simple, like I said, but I love it, and the inspiration came with the postcard. So that's it for card number 1, and here I'm just showing you the inspiration and one final close-up, and we're going to move on to card number 2. For card number 2, I wanted to color up all of these beautiful shells and this sand dollar that came in the stamp set this month. So I'm going to go ahead and color the sand dollar here, and I'm using my warm grays for that. So I'm using my warm gray 5, warm gray 3, warm gray 1, and my W00. So I'm laying the darkest color to the inside of the sand dollar, and then on the 2 little pieces that are kind of coming up from the indent on the sides. I went through that really quickly. I did speed up the coloring. I know a lot of you love to have the coloring in the video, but I didn't want it to be too long, so I did speed it up so you could still see it, but you weren't here all day watching this video. So now I'm working on the seashell here in the middle. For this one, I'm using a peach color combination. I used YR02 as my darkest marker, E11 as my midtone, and E00 as my highlight or lightest color. For this seashell, I'm using a tan color. My darkest is E33, the midtone is E53, and then E51. There's lots of definition in these seashells, so really you just have to pick where you want your darkest shadows to be. Go ahead and add that to the image and then blend it out with your midtone, and then go over that and blend out with your lightest color. So for most of these, because there's so much detail, I'm just using a 3-color blend. For this pretty little seashell, I'm going to do a pink combination. So my darkest color is the R22, my midtone the R20, and my lightest the R00. So I'm just adding some shading down at the bottom, and then also there'd be a little bit of shadow between those ridges on the seashells. For this final seashell, I'm doing a blush color. I chose R30 as my darkest, E00 as my midtone, and then E000 as my lightest. And now we have the seashells all colored up, so we can get started on creating the card. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut out a panel on some white cardstock with a stitched rectangle die. Then I'm going to go ahead and cut out a frame here on this beautiful white and tan wood grain paper. I cut out the center just because I knew that you wouldn't be able to see it and I didn't want to waste the paper. So I'm going to add a little bit of Distress Oxide in Tattered Rose to my focal panel here, just using my makeup brush to add on a little bit of pigment just to have a nice soft background to frame our seashells. I'm going to be making a little wreath for this particular card. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to my card base. All of my cards today are standard A2 size cards at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So once I get that on, I can go ahead and start looking at what shells I want to use and creating the wreath. So I have popped up all of the seashells on some foam adhesive. I'm not putting a lot of pressure down on this yet. I'm just simply taking off the release paper and putting them lightly on the cardstock where I think I want them to go. This will give me some wiggle room so I can move them around and get that circular wreath shape that I'm going for. So once I get them into place, I will apply more pressure to each of the images, and that will allow them to stick down firmly and they won't go anywhere once I do that. So you can see here, I'm just fiddling around with placement. I want to get this shell here over a little bit more to the right hand side of the card, that one in between the two sand dollars. So I'm just going to pull that up a little bit more, and then you get a more circular shape here. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, nothing in card making has to be perfect, but you just want to make it as close as possible to a circle so people will understand that you're trying to make this look like a wreath. For the sentiment, I went ahead and I heat embossed the sentiment shell a braid each day on some black cardstock with some white embossing powder, and I'm just going to add this to the bottom of the wreath, and I think that looks really pretty. I just fishtailed each of the ends there. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some detail with my white gel pen, just to add a little bit of interest to this card, and it will allow the images to pop. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I love my white gel pen detailing. So that will be it for this card. I'll show you a close-up here, and then we will move on to card number 3. So for card number 3, I'm using the adorable little ship scene in the bottle. I used a number of blue combinations for this particular image. So for the sky, I'm using B02 as my darkest, B00 as my midtone, and B000 as the lightest. I'm just going ahead and adding my darkest shadows around the ship's sails and underneath the clouds, as well as underneath the front of the boat. I'm going to blend that out with my B00, just pulling that dark color out a little bit more. But you're going to notice I'm leaving a lot of white space here until I bring in my B000. And that's just because I wanted this to have a soft, pretty look. So I want the majority of the sky to be this lightest color. But you could definitely play around with your different blues here. And I think whatever blue combination you choose would be really pretty. For the ocean waves, I'm going to actually do 2 colors. I wanted like 2 different color families. I wanted there to be some variation in the waves, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So for this aqua teal color, I'm using BG18, BG13, and then BG11. I colored the little flags on the ship in this same color combination as well. So you can just randomly pick here which parts of the waves you want to add a secondary color to. If you choose to add the secondary color, I just think it gives the waves a bit of a pop and really makes that detail on this stamped image really pretty. So once I get the midtone down, I am now going to blend this out with my lightest color, and then I will move on to the third combination of blues, and for that I chose B97 as my darkest, B95 as my midtone, and then B91 as my lightest color. So I'm taking my darkest marker and I'm just adding that to various parts of the waves here. Now, because these are very small areas, you want to make sure you're just barely touching the tip of your marker to the paper. This will help to ensure that it doesn't bleed through the lines. So once I got that darker color down, I'm coming in now with my midtone, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to blend those two colors out with the B91, which is my lightest. And I'm also going to add the B91 to the top part of the glass bottle. I wanted a soft color. I don't even do any shading to that, just simply putting down that B91. So for the boat, I'm going to do a 4-color blend here. I'm also going to use these same colors for the cork. And the colors I used from darkest to lightest is E25, E35, E53, and E51. So I'm laying the darkest color to the bottom of the boat where the waves would cast a shadow. I also added the darkest color to the left-hand side of each of the little porthole windows. And I also added the darkest shading to the bottom of the cork, and then blended that out as I went down the different color markers that I had there. For the sails and the clouds, I'm just going to do these easy peasy in white. So I'm using C3, C1, and C00 here. I'm going to leave quite a bit of white space on my sails and in the clouds so that they look white and not gray. And once I get this done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fussy cut out this image, which was super simple. And then I can go ahead and get started on creating the background for my card, which I'm going to do with some Distress Oxide inks. So I'm going to bring out my Distress Oxides in Blueprint Sketch, Salty Ocean, Peacock Feathers, and Tumbled Glass. I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock for this. I've gone ahead and sped this process up quite quickly as well, just so that you can see how I've done this. I'm using the embossing folder that came in the kit this month, and it's a Sunray embossing folder, but when I saw it, I immediately pictured it looking like there are light rays coming through the ocean water, so that's how I'm going to use that embossing folder. So I added the Blueprint Sketch to the bottom, which will be my darkest color, blended that out with the Salty Ocean, and then the Peacock Feathers, and finally the Tumbled Glass. Now for my first layer, I'm not worried about getting full coverage. I just want some ink down on my paper so it will move around better as I go over this a second time. And this is where I'll really add more color. Now the second time around, I'm going to add another layer of every color except the Blueprint Sketch. Instead, I'm going to go over the bottom of the Blueprint Sketch with the Salty Ocean. This will give me a natural gradient in color, but I think it blends much nicely and keeps it in a better color family, if that makes sense, hopefully. Once I got that done, I used my Distress sprayer there to add some water droplets, and I feel like this just adds to the look of the sunshine coming through the water. I die cut some of the craft cardstock that came in the kit with a wavy border die by Fawn. This is going to be the sandbank at the bottom of the ocean. I'm just going to go ahead and trim this panel up a little bit so I have some white from the card base framing the card panel. I'm just going to glue this down with my liquid adhesive. This will give me a little bit of wiggle room to make sure it's straight. And now we have the panel on our card base here. So now I can go ahead and add our little ship in the bottom, and I'm going to tuck that behind the sandbank there to the left, and then in front of the sandbank to the right. Now there is a little bit of a gaping space underneath the middle, but I think that's okay because the bottle necessarily wouldn't be sitting snugly to the bottom of the ocean anyways. So you can have it so there's no blue space underneath the bottle, or you can do it like I did. I went ahead and I adhered the sentiment onto the card panel, and it reads, "I sure do think you're amazing." I went ahead and heat embossed the little wood embellishment with the embossing powder that came in the kit and attached that to the left side of my sentiment. So now we're moving on to card number 4. I'm cutting out this really pretty pattern with a large stitched rectangle die, and I only was going to see a very little bit of this peeking out from my main panel. So I decided to cut the center out because it was the beautiful blue wood grain pattern that I used in card 1. So I knew that if I cut it out this way, I could make a second card just like card 1, and I wouldn't have to waste that paper. So I'm going to add some Distress Oxide again to my focal panel. This time though, I'm using pumice stone, and I'm just dabbing off the makeup brush there onto a piece of laminated cardstock, which I can just wash up, so it's super environmentally friendly to use a laminated piece of cardstock to tap off or do any of your Distress Oxide blending. So I got my frame onto my card base. I just needed to trim up the one side here a little bit. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this panel with the Distress Oxide ink to the center. Just going to fit that snugly inside. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay out these sand dollars here. I absolutely loved sand dollars. When I was a kid, we used to visit Florida all of the time at Christmas, and we would go and look for sand dollars. So this card really brings back a lot of nice memories. So I went ahead and I laid out my sand dollars here where I think I sort of want them. I cut my stamp sentiment here in half, and this one says, "I love you like the sea loves this shore." I didn't want it to be full length, so you can mask this off if you don't like to cut your stamps. I don't mind cutting my stamps if it means I'll get more use out of them. So I'm using my Versafine Clair Nocturne ink here just to stamp the sentiment towards the bottom. Now I'm going to bring back the sand dollars here and get them adhered on to the card. I did go ahead and pop 3 of them up on some foam adhesive. The other 2 I will glue straight down to the focal panel here of my card. So again, I'm just going to figure out, I was trying to decide here if I wanted those 2 sand dollars in the center to both be popped up on foam adhesive, or if I wanted to have it with 1 popped up and 1 flat. I ended up deciding to put 2 raised ones there in the center, and then that final one will be adhered directly to the card. So once I get that last one down, I'm just going to look at the position and make sure they're where I want them. Then I'm going to bring in these really pretty rose gold rhinestones that came with the kit this month. And I thought this just added a little bit of a wow factor to this card. They're so pretty and they go really well with the pattern paper that I used on the back that looks like burlap. So pretty. So I'm just going to get those into place. I'll show you a close-up and then we'll move on to the 5th and final card for this card kit. For this card, I thought it would be fun to make a little ship window scene. So I went ahead and cut out that wood grain paper with a stitched rectangle die. Then I'm using the porthole die from Fawn. I just cut that out of some white cardstock, and I'm going to adhere that down to a circle. I just went ahead and blended that with my Distress Oxides off camera. Same technique I did for card number 3. Once I got those adhered, I wanted to place the panel here down onto my card base. And then I'm going to add the little porthole window to the center top portion of the card. I will add my stamp block on this just to make sure it adheres well. And then I'm going to add some of the little wood veneer pieces into that porthole. So again, I had embossed these with the embossing powder. You can also color these if you don't want to heat emboss them, or you could leave them plain, which would look really pretty. It would pick up on that wood grain paper in the background. So I'm just going to add those and make sure they adhere well, and then I'm going to add the sentiment, and I used the same sentiment I did in the last card, although this time I went ahead and heat embossed them with white embossing powder on some black cardstock. To add a little bit of embellishment to this card, I added some Nuvo drops in Morning Dew to the water area, and then I thought I would tie in the black from the sentiment more with the card, so I went ahead and I used my Nuvo drops in Ebony Black, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in those little die cut holes that make it look like a porthole window. Now this one got out of the hole a little, so I just used my craft pick to push that color back in, and it was fine. You can't tell that it came off the circle a little bit. So there's card number 4 complete. I'm going to slow this down a little and show you all 5 cards now. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I absolutely love this kit. So thanks Pink and Main for allowing me to work with this amazing kit. As always, let me know what your favorite card was. I always love to hear which ones you're liking. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for all your comments, your likes, and for subscribing to my channel. It really means a lot to me. I love being able to do this. So thank you, and I will see you soon. Bye.